Good morning in Stockholm and good evening in Taipei. Welcome everyone in the audience tuning in to another iteration of ISDP's Taiwan Lecture Series. My name is August Börjesson. I am the acting head of ISDP's Stockholm Taiwan Center. Today's lecture will be on the topic of Taiwan's national security strategy under Donald Trump's second presidency. And we are quite privileged to have a terrific speaker, Dr. William Jung, who will illuminate on this topic for us today. In Europe, the return of US President Trump to the White House has brought along with it many discussions about what can be expected from America and transatlantic cooperation during his second term in office. And in Taiwan too, the topic of what the second term of President Donald Trump means for Taiwan's security has been much discussed. The US plays an outsized role when it comes to Taiwan's security environment, and it is traditionally Taiwan's most important international partner. As such, the policies that US presidents and their administrations pursue play a very important part regarding the stability and the status quo in the Taiwan Strait. 100 days into Trump's second term as US president, the question is, what will the next years mean for Taiwan and its national security strategy? Today's lecture will delve into how Taiwan's President Lai Ching-te plans to navigate the shifting global landscape following Donald Trump's return to office, with President Lai Ching-te's goal of protecting Taiwan's sovereignty while preserving peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait. The lecture will be structured in three parts. A look at President Lai's national security strategy, an analysis of Xi Jinping's approach to Taiwan, and an overview of Trump's Taiwan Strait policy. After the presentation, Dr. Jung will answer questions from the audience, and questions are very welcome in the Q&A function during the presentation. So we will then try and cover as many of them as time allows after the presentation. So now I am delighted to introduce our presenter for today's lecture, Dr. William Jung, Associated Senior Research Fellow at ISDP. Dr. Jung is an Assistant Research Fellow in the Division of Defense Strategy and Resources at the Institute for National Defense and Security Research in Taiwan, and an Assistant Professor at the National Defense University in Taiwan. His research interests include security and strategic studies, with a particular focus on Taiwan's national security strategies, Sino-American relations, the South China Sea, and Europe. He holds a PhD from the Department of International Relations at the London School of Economics and Political Science. On behalf of ISDP's Stockholm Taiwan Center, I welcome Dr. William Jung. And Dr. Jung, the floor is yours.
Thank you. It's my great pleasure to show my observations about Taiwan's national security strategy under, the Trump's second presidency. I think before, I think the hosts have introduced the three parts of my lectures. But before that, I will add one part. Is I would like to talk about the general idea of Taiwan's national security strategies. And so I think when talking about the Taiwan national security strategy, I think the first thing is there is no official definition about Taiwan national security by the Taiwanese government so far. That means we haven't published any, like the U.S., the National Security Strategy Report, something like that. We haven't, have published that kind of document yet. So there is no official definition about Taiwan national security strategy so far. And I think if we look the Taiwan or ROC's constitutions, it's described, the national security policy is decided by the presidents. And according to the National Security Council Organization Act, the content of the national security is defined by four parts. The first is national defense, foreign affairs, cross-strait relations, and major national contingency. These four parts we will, including what according to the law, what's the mean or the content of the national security. And the Taiwan's government formally outlined its solo national security report, that strategy is in 2006 under the former president Chen Shui-bian. He's the DPP president as well. I think the goal of the national security strategies is, according to the report, is holding on three parts. One is uphold sovereign dignity and ensure the survival and security and promote the sustained prosperity and development. I think all three parts. And I think the report is mainly, I think, is the focus on the cross-strait relations. If we look back to the content of the report, is the first is they introduce the security environment and assess the threat and the strategy and the conclusion part. So anyway, that the first and the only the national security report published in 2006 is mainly focused on the cross-strait relation. I think it's not quite surprised because Taiwan's the main strategy straits from the mainland China. But in short, the first Taiwan's national security report document, I think when they explained about the Taiwan national security strategy, or the TNSS, is a kind of the comprehensive idea. The report underscored that national security is a comprehensive concept covering the political stability, economic resilience, military strength, and psychological preparedness. I think that's, if we would look back, the only document, the national security report from Taiwan. And now the latest about an idea of national security strategy is there is a law, now draft law in the Taiwan's parliament is now presented by the opposite party KMT in last year July. But according to the law called the National Security Strategy Act, but there's still no definition about national security strategies. But it's according to the draft, it's more focused about the external strategic environment, budget distributions, and prioritization assessments. And if we look at the whole draft, in the part of it, it just shows the government should present to publish just like the U.S. national security strategies. The government should publish and to define the national security strategy report. And the strategy report is a content of four main parts. One is the national vision and national interest. The second part is the major challenge and threat assessment. And the third part is fundamental principle for safeguarding the national security. The fourth part is priority area of comprehensive security policy. But anyway, in short, that's the latest now we can have about the kind of idea of Taiwan's perspective on national security strategy. But saying that, I will try to conclude to present myself after doing research on Taiwan national security strategy since the 1949, I think the Taiwan's security strategy can consist of three parts. One is the power creation. The second part is the interest identifications, and the third part is threat perceptions. That's power, interest, and threat. That can consist of Taiwan national security strategy. If we try to to analyze the president's the national security strategy, and after study the Taiwan's the president from Chiang Kai-shek since 1949 to current president Lai Ching-te. Well, we can, I think I can say that Taiwan national security strategy over the past decades has been fundamentally driven by one primary factor, that is to secure the perspective of the ROC sovereign status as understood by Taipei's leader. I think that's the short questions. It's all meant focus about how to define the ROC's sovereign status. I think that's very true to if we want to understand what the President Lai Ching-te's his idea about the TNSS. Now I will go to the second part of President Lai's idea of TNSS. I think fundamentally, I think China adopted a hostile attitude toward the DPP's the government. And now in the Lai Ching-te's the presidency, China has suspended all the official cross-strait dialogue and exchange. And since the President Lai Ching-te assumed office last year, China already escalate his the words a kind of the rhetoric and offense and the military coercions and try to the press put the pressure on the Taiwan side. And so far, and it's quite obvious. So far, the Beijing already launched 3 larger military drills against the Lai's administration. The one is in the May 23 last year. They called the Joint Sharp Sword 2024A. That's just after the President Lai took office. And another is when President Lai make a remark in the RC's national birthdays in the the October 10. Soon after that, China launched the second major military drills in October 14. They called the Joint Sharp Sword 2024B. I think because that China is really the first when President Lai took office, he took I think quite a famous famous remark. He says that China and the ROC and the PRC are not subordinate to each other. So that means a two sovereign states. Of course, China is extremely angry about that. And then in the the ROC's the National Day, President Lai he launched another remark, a quite famous remark. He's talking about the theory of the motherland. It's just he argued that the ROC's birthday is high, in the 1911 is earlier than the PRC's 1949. So there is no point. The PRC should say he claimed the ROC's status. I think, of course, that's a kind of another about the national, the sovereignty issues, and that's really upset the China. And the last one is in this year's April 2, when they call the military exercise, China's called the Strait Thunder 2025A. I think that exercise is quite unique if you compare the last year's one. And there is no, the prior notice. and it's a kind of the surprise attack. Of course, this kind of the military exercise is similar last year's, but if we look the background, it's many, I think, against the President Lai's this remark in the March 13. At that time, he held a high-level national security meeting, and it's the first time I think the President Lai have proposed, but very clear about the Taiwan's national security strategies. During the meeting, in his remark, he highlighted the 5 major national security threats against Taiwan, and he proposed the 17 major strategy to deal with these 5 major threats. I think the 5 major threats, according to President Lai Ching-te's, against Taiwan's national security strategy, is about the first is the China's threat to the national sovereignty, and the second is the threat, the infrastructures and espionage activity targeting Taiwan's military. And the third part is the threat aimed at obscure the national identity of the people of Taiwan. And the fourth threat is from the, China used the United Front infrastructure into the Taiwanese society through the cross-strait exchange. And the fifth threat is the threat from using the integrated development, try to attract the Taiwanese business people and the youngs. So President Lai highlights these 5 threats from the mainland China as the national security strategy. And of course, according to follow respectively to counter this 5 threats, he respectively to provide the 17 strategy. I think it's too detailed. I will not, because the time, I will not present here. If you're interested, you can see the Taiwan president's the official website. You can find that. And I will just point the first one. He highlight the first is the China's threat to national sovereignty against Taiwan. I think that's if you look the Taiwan and the Lai Ching-te's idea of the national, the TNSS is the Lai Ching-te is quite, I think, quite deliberately or frankly to I will call it the sovereignty first policies to respond China's threat. I think that's he made a clear argument, as he mentioned in last year's. He said ROC and PRC are not subordinate to each other, and Taiwan have the right to decide its own future, the fate. It's not by the mainland China, it's only by the Taiwanese people. I think he has quite emphasized a kind of, I would call a kind of the sovereignty-centric perspective. And he argued that in the broadest consensus now in Taiwan society is to defend our sovereignty, to uphold our free and democratic way of life, and resolutely against the China's annexations of Taiwan. I think he called that the broadest consensus. And so according to that, he asked his administration to try to promote what he called the 4 pillar of peace action plan. And I will explain what he means of the 4 pillars, the peace action plan. And he also asked how to, especially the foreign affairs department, to cooperate with all our friends and allies to, opposing the China's, ambitions in Taiwan, and try to isolate Taiwan from the international society. I think if I say from in the beginning, if from the 3 components of the national security strategy, if from the threat perception, I think the Lai Ching-te make it clear. He defined, I think it's the first time after the 1996 when Taiwan really become a democratic country. He defined China as an external hostile entity. It's the first time in Taiwan's the government to define China as the. I think not mentioned the President Chiang Kai-shek and Jiang Jingguo during that, of course, that's no problem. But what I mentioned is since the 1990s, Taiwan, be a truly democratic country, and it's the first time, the Taiwan's government to define China as the external hostile entities. And the second is to define from the interest, the national interest. Lai Ching-te put the sovereignty and peace as the two core national interests for the TNSS, Taiwan National Security Strategies. And then the third part is what we call it, I think, creating the power. He used this kind of what he called the 4 pillars of peace strategy to ensure Taiwan's security and promote the stability across the strait. The 4 pillars of peace. The first is strengthening the Taiwan's defense, and the second is reinforcing the economic resilience. The third part is deepening the ties with democratic partners. The fourth part is pursuing the cross-strait dialogue. He still open a kind of the dialogue with China. So that's if you found the threat perceptions, the interest definitions, and the power creations. And I think I can offer more about Lai's idea of Taiwan national security strategy after he defining the proposed a kind of the 5 national threat and 17 strategy to counter that threat. I think during his presidential election, Lai Ching-te proposed what he called a national hope project, and this whole project have a kind of the 3 kind the values. It's about the peace, the sovereignty, and the prosperities. But I think no matter what what is the national hope project, I think this will guide all his 4 years presidency, and he argued you should emphasize democratic values and peaceful means. And that's quite interesting. It's quite worth to note it is that the President Lai will follow his the predecessors, the President Tsai Ing-wen's the status quo policy, and Tsai Ing-wen's the status quo policy is quite recognized by international society, especially from the U.S. And when the Tsai Ing-wen the status quo policy, he presented what she called a 4 commitment, and this call for commitment is including the defending Taiwan democratic and constitutional order. That's the first, and the second is the same. The ROC and PRC are mutual, not subordinate entities. And the third is rejecting any, the annexation of Taiwan's sovereignty. And the fourth is affirming the island's future must decide solely by its people. So when Beijing is quite offensive, saying the President Lai Ching-te argue that the PRC and ROC Taiwan is not subordinate each other's. I think this is the new. Actually, the former president Tsai Ing-wen already made that kind of the argues. I think that's the first part. At the second part, I will try to present President Lai's idea of the the TNSS, and then I will try to the next one to I think the main before that, I think I would like to try to figure out the main feature of Trump's doctrines in the cross-strait relation or international relation. The first is, I think, is that everyone knows the trade protections grounded in the neo-mercantilism. And the second part of Trump doctrines, I will argue, is a kind of the neo-nationalism with the anti-globalization stance. And the third part from the diplomatic perspective, as Trump's quite famous, the American first. So it's a kind of unilateralism. And the fourth part is socially, I think the Trump's lend to the right-wing conservatism with the incline to a state authoritarianism. And the fifth part, I think additional Trump doctrines make a kind of quite a strategic use of populism as a political tool and promote a very strong sense of personal heroism. So I think from a security perspective, Trump's, if we would put in the international arena, Trump is, I would classify it as classical realism, underscore the primary of military strength and the pursuit of its American own national interest. And what's the major effect of Trump's doctrines? I will conclude in four parts so far. The one is the erosions of American global leadership, especially in the Western world. And the second part is because Trump's unpredictables, it's make a kind of skepticism toward the U.S. is now a kind of the spreading in the international society. And the third effect of a Trump doctrine is Trump shifting its global strategic focus from Europe to concentrate on Indo-Pacific to counter China. I think that's quite important if you look in the Taiwan's cases. And the fourth part, I think, especially when we talking about now Trump's the tariff, the war, I think facing Trump's the aggressive the tariff pressure tactics. I think China respond with a hotline. I think everyone noticed, and I will call it a kind of a trade war warrior style, the trade strategy, and this will the sharpen or the deepen the U.S. and China rivalry, and from a cautious from we call the de-risking now to a full nearly the decoupling. I think that's the major the four major effects. And now if we focus about Trump's cross-strait policy, I think the first is, I will argue, fundamentally, the U.S.-Taiwan relations will be defined by U.S.-China relations. Saying that is if the U.S. the China relations increase and then will sacrifice the U.S.-Taiwan relation, vice versa. I think that's quite clear the situation if you look at the U.S., Taiwan, and China relations since 1949. And the second part is the Taiwan being prioritized as the U.S. the solo passing scenario. And when I'm saying that, is according to the March, the 13th, according to the Washington Post, the Defense Secretary, the Hexes already the memo saying that China is the department's solely passing threat, and to deny the China facing accomplish to occupy Taiwan will be the same as the Homeland Security is the department's solely passing scenario. That means Taiwan's the issues have been prioritized in the Trump administrations from international security strategies. That's quite quite surprising, to be honest. But anyway, that's so far if we according to the U.S. the memo. And the third part is the Trump administration cross-strait policy will continue to internationalize Taiwan's issues. I think this was since the former President the Biden, he will continue that kind of international Taiwan's issue. I think because I think China, the U.S. Will not like to to face the China alone. Of course he would like to make most his allies to as joint forces to counter China's threats. So I think under the Trump administration, I think we of course we all know that Trump already saying that he valued the relation with China is more than with Taiwan. But if we put in the global context, if China as his the government's we call, no matter you call it competitor or the rivalry number one, then Taiwan have its value to to counter China, because from a geostrategic perspective, and of course the second is from when everyone we know that the Taiwan play a decisive role in the semiconductor supply chain all over the world. So Taiwan play a very, very important role, especially that kind of the global supply chains decisive role that will have a very close link to Trump's the kind of the economic centrist national security policies. So let's make Taiwan's matter. Even Trump look high, China look down Taiwan. But when you consider, if you put China as the most the serious threat, then Taiwan has strategic value will presented and will be emerge for Trump's global strategies. How many time I left? Oops.
You have about you can 10 minutes maximum. 10 minutes.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thanks. So so then I will continue the President Lai's response to Trump. I think when given, I think Trump have adopted a kind of the strategic ambiguity in Taiwan's cases, because Trump's have declined many times when asking will American will military defense Taiwan, but so I think during the Trump's this kind of strategic ambiguity position and his anti-war position, when if we look back when the Trump saying in the Ukraine war, so I think that Trump's anti-war positions and his the ambiguity about in the Taiwan's the cases. So I think U.S. military intervention to defend Taiwan is highly unlikely under his administration. But saying that, so I think the Trump, if he don't unlikely to military intervene, so I think he will the main strategy for Trump administration in Taiwan's cases, he will focus about prevent the confrontations with the deterrence and denial as its core of the strategic framework in the cross-strait relations, the cross-strait issues. So the Trump, I would say he will adopt a kind of the dual track forms. The first, of course, the Trump hate the free rider, everyone know that. So he will ask the Taiwan to significantly to increase its defense spending and military readiness. That's the first. We're quite sure about that. And actually, Taiwan, we are quite a positive response to this. And of course, the second track to deter the the military confrontation in Taiwan Strait from the Taiwan's part and from the U.S. part is, I think the Trump will try to to deploy its military and diplomatic and to use its military and diplomatic economic power, try to dissuade China to use force to to attack Taiwan. That's what we call it, prevent the conflict in advance. I think that's Trump's total strategies in the cross-strait relations. And I think with Trump's return is quite interesting. According to INDSR, the latest poll is showing that in Taiwan society, there is a growing public doubt about the future about Taiwan and the U.S. relation. I think it's about around the 12% decrease if you compare the formal, the polls. So anyway, it's when Trump take power, I think the Taiwanese society have a increased doubt about Trump's administrations in case of supporting Taiwan. But saying that, so that's the general idea. I think that's not only in Taiwan, that's the same in Europe as well. When we look in what Trump has done in Ukraine, there's a kind of the skepticism against the US. And I think but saying that, no matter how, I think as long as the China being the foremost strategic competitor or rivalry for the Trump's the administration, I think Taiwan is a key strategic asset in Trump's effort to counter China. And Trump the transactions worldviews, I think that's will be Taiwan's we can see President Lai's his strategy is have a more tightly aligned its Taiwan's interest with the U.S. That's because Trump only concerned how you can give him. He's a kind of the deal maker. So you have to consider how important Taiwan can make contribution to the U.S. government. So but I already saying that as long as the U.S. consider China as the most strategic rivalry, then Taiwan is a value from geostrategic perspective and from Taiwan's play a decisive role in global supply chain. And the President Lai make most of this. And the President Lai's visions about the Taiwan, what he called a new era of value-based diplomacies, and emphasize grounded in three principles: democracy, peace, and prosperity, and to try to use this kind of the three, the common value, try to link with the President Trump's. And I think let me have a look. A President Lai's response to Trump, I will conclude in three parts. The one is try to still to internationalize the cross-strait issues, and the second is to because preserving peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait now it seems a kind of the common interest for international society. So I think the President Lai will try to make most of this kind of the consensus in the international society and to increase the international involvement or internationalize the Taiwan's issues. And the second and the third part is that President Lai will use the status quo to counter China's revisionism in the regions. I think that's the not only in the Taiwan Strait, like in the South China Sea as well, in the Eastern China Sea as well. So I think that President Lai will quite focus on the status quo strategies, again, China's revisionisms. And more far, following the President Lai's strategy, now more far prevent a kind of the three-chain strategy. This kind of the three-chain strategy is what we call the first is the linkage to the global democratic value chain. That's the first chain. The second chain is reinforcing the first island chain in the Indo-Pacific. And the third chain is advance a China-free supply chain to reduce the strategic dependence in China. So I think in short, the Lai strategies is bound by a shared interest and value, try to connect with the Trump's the vision about the Americans' global strategy. And the second is, of course, the communication and connectivities, try to use this, try to communicate intensively with the Trump. And in short, I think the President Lai will make good use of the economic advantage and ensure a strong national defense posture and the leverage of value strength. Use this kind of three, try to to connect Taiwan and China. And the last part, I think we're talking. I will deal with the Xi Jinping's way to deal the cross-strait issues. I think Xi Jinping, because the time limits, I will just point the 4 points. The first, when Xi Jinping deal the cross-strait issue under the President Lai Ching-te, I think China has applied the maximum pressures on Taiwan and manipulate the confrontations. I mean that every normal country will prevent any confrontation, especially the military confrontations. And but in the Taiwan's case, China is quite a favor in the manipulate this kind of the confrontation to put the pressures on DPP government. I think this is we can see that derived from the Xi Jinping his what he called the struggle the theories. And China, this is based on China is quite confident they have a military upper hand against Taiwan, so it can feel free to doing that. But that's the fact we can see that. So the first is that during Xi Jinping is quite will apply the maximum pressures on Taiwan and especially manipulate the military, the coercion against Taiwan. And the second part is, I think, the object of the China's military, this kind of incursions, is the target in Taiwan. I think extended more than intimidation or simulation of potential invasion. They also aim at a kind of the communicate political message to both Taiwan and the international community, and then assessing their reactions. And then he can try to, I say, manipulate this kind of the coercion and confrontation. And the third part is reinforce the One China principle as a means to justify Beijing's claim of sovereignty over Taiwan and to push back against the U.S.-Taiwan's effort try to internationalize the Taiwan's cases. And the fourth part is that China now, the Xi Jinping is counter the China's military presence and diplomatic influence in the region by spreading the kind of the skepticism toward the U.S. And quite interesting in I think in this April, China proposed a kind of the it's a kind of the neighborhood strategy. That's befriending the neighbor and while countering the distant rival. It will focus about the Asia Pacific, the surrounding area instead of, for example, in the Africa or in the Europe try to to counter the U.S. He will more focus on his surrounding area and use this as the base ground and to counter the U.S. influence, especially will be quite useful in the cross-strait cases. Okay, I hope my today's presentation will not too long. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you kindly, Dr. Jung. That was a terrific presentation. And we have at this point many questions. And many questions. Perhaps I can lead off with one or two on my own. So I'm thinking about, you mentioned President Lai emphasizing sovereignty and autonomy. You mentioned the desire for peace and stability and maintaining the status quo in the Taiwan Strait. And you mentioned the Lai's four pillars of peace. But you also mentioned the continuation of this line that the two sides of the Taiwan Strait are not subordinate to one another. And you mentioned President Lai saying that in actuality is the ROC that can be considered the motherland, you mentioned. And of course, we know that such a remark is taken provocatively in the PRC. So I guess my question is, what do you think regarding the fourth pillar of peace, then the dialogue with the PRC? What is your assessment? Is that achievable at this time?
I think it's in short, very hard, because the sovereignty issue. I think currently lies the government and Beijing's. It's just like there's no common ground. There's no common ground in terms of sovereignty. And when both sides consider sovereignty first, I think that you should understand Taiwan's perspective, especially from the Taiwan side, because if we give up this kind of the sovereignty and to accept what we charge Beijing the one China policy, then Taiwan issue will be China domestic issues. Then there is no point international society can get interventions in the case in Taiwan's cases when China invade Taiwan. So I think that's quite important. I think so. That's the sovereignty is the most difficult part, and unfortunately, this is the part that two sides there's no common ground. So I think even the U.S. does not accept China have the sovereign in Taiwan. So U.S. says, okay, I have a one China policy, but my one China policy is different from Beijing's one China principle. I think the Western country says, yes, there's only one China, no problem. That China is the PRC, but when you consider the Taiwan cases, they will say, not sure. They just say ambiguity about the Taiwan sovereignty. Even that kind of ambiguity is a kind of the indirect decline, China's sovereign crime over Taiwan. I think that's quite, even the U.S. does not. So we can see in that even, I think recently the U.S. the UN representative to raise the issue about when the 1971 the UN resolution 2758. It's about when Taiwan because this to force to leave the UN, and the American says that China abuse the resolutions then to try to damage Taiwan's the international participation. Anyway, this is all related about the Taiwan sovereignty issues. So I think about we all very clear Taiwan's, the China used the one China policies, and Taiwan, of course, we will not accept that kind of Beijing's one China policy. Otherwise, Taiwan's issue will be a China, the PRC's domestic issue. Then international society cannot justify to put a finger in the Taiwan's cases. Not mentioned the U.S. now have the positions. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So we will try to move ahead so we can get you to answer a couple of questions. And I have another one because you previously you wrote a contribution for we had a volume last year, Taiwan and International Organizations, and you wrote about the implications for Taiwan's national security. I recommend everyone in the audience to give it a read because it was very interesting. And in your talk today, you return a couple of times to the concept of internationalizing the Taiwan issues. And of course, we know that the PRC are trying to internalize Taiwan issues, and you write about that in your chapter there. So I'm very curious because you just now mentioned also the UN and Resolution 2758. And if we get back to Trump, because the United States under Trump, they are now pursuing an approach where they are not staying in the international organizations, but they are withdrawing, for example, from the World Health Organization. And I was wondering if you have any thoughts about what that could mean for Taiwan, because Taiwan, from my perspective, is very much dependent on the global sort of advocacy for its meaningful participation. And then what does it mean then that maybe its most important international partner is choosing to pull out of the WHO? What do you think that means?
I'll be honest, this kind of the international participations, I think it just a kind of shows Taiwan's existence. Taiwan is not part of China. Make this kind of message. But this can this kind of message make the Taiwan more skilled it is still too early to tell. But anyway, we all know that when a small country like actually we are not that small when we consider our economic power, but when compared with China, of course, when compared with China, the worst situation for Taiwan will be international isolations. Then China will have a free hand to deal with Taiwan, just like Russia try to deal with Ukraine. If Ukraine be international isolation, then that will be the most strategic advantage for Russians. It's similar in the Taiwan's cases. So even I think Taiwan's what the U.S. says the meaningful participation international organization, that's still not can to a kind of the kind of the claim Taiwan is a sovereign states, or at least that's create that kind of image. Taiwan is not part of China. I think that's the most important part, and this part is China hated, and China will only accept Taiwan take part the international organization like Hong Kong. Yes, if Taiwan says yes, we are part of, we agree the one China principle or one China, then he can move. I think that China's the big strategy. I think is Xi Jinping. Even after Xi Jinping is the same, he will just try to isolate Taiwan. Then he can have a free hand to do anything he wants. And that's the worst scenario for Taiwan. I think when we look at the Ukraine cases, one lesson Taiwan learned is that, as I mentioned, this kind of international support and the international, the international, like always said, internationalizations, the Ukraine cases. If the Ukraine cases be international isolation, then Ukraine will have a very, very difficult situation to against Russia. It's similar in Taiwan. So that kind of the international isolation, that Taiwan will do our most to prevent that kind of situation happen. So that's why I say Taiwan will try to make a connection to the international society. Now we have a thing, because we work very hard, we can say now the semiconductors cases, now if Taiwan have issues, it's not like Ukraine, then the whole global supply chain will have a big trouble. So that's what make Taiwan have a connection to the international society. Even that's not a kind of the political perspective, but it will have political meaning there and security meaning there.
Thank you very much. And I will connect another question that we have to what you just mentioned about semiconductors. So the US has put pressure on Taiwanese chip makers into reshoring to the American continent. Do you think that is a potential destabilizing factor for cross-strait security? Do you believe that the decreasing concentration of semiconductor manufacturing on Taiwanese soil, could that make the island into an easier target for the PRC? How do you view this?
Yeah, some people will say yes. If the semiconductor plays such an important role, what we call the chip shield, what we call the chip shield. And if you to go abroad, will that downgrade or decrease that kind of importance? But I think we all know quite clear about that. Now we were the core parts were made in Taiwan. That's what make yes, maybe they were part of them were global, but the main part, the very core part were preserved to made in Taiwan, and that's what make this kind of, yes, the TSMC will have a factory in Japan, I'm saying not only in US, in Japan, in Europe as well. In Germany, I remember in Germany and in Germany they built a factory there. So I think this kind of the sharing, but the main strategy is I think the TSMC and Taiwan's government and Lai Ching-te's government already make it very, very clear. TSMC, the semiconductor, the very core part was still made in Taiwan. That will keep Taiwan have that kind of the cutting edge advantage. And saying that, I think when people, especially now, Trump put quite a great pressures as TSMC to move to have a factory in the US. Well, I think everyone knowing that kind of at least I would say quite confident. During Trump 4 years, Taiwan played the decisive role in the semiconductor, the global supply chain will not change. Within the Trump, during the 4 years, Trump, the second terms, that kind of Taiwan's a decisive role in the supply chain will not change. So this is quite important to reply another question, because everyone and many people are quite concerned about the timetables, about the PRC or the PLA will attack Taiwan, especially they put in a finger a day. Is US the intelligence that says okay, the 2027, 2 years ago, 2 years later. So, but I'm saying that, yeah, even in 2027, Taiwan semiconductors play a decisive role in the global supply chain will not change. When you consider this situation, I think international society should take it very, very seriously to consider how to deter China, to attack Taiwan. Yeah.
Thank you kindly, Dr. Jung. I see that we have unfortunately already ran out of time and we had so many questions more. I guess we will have to have you back for another talk soon enough,
Yes, no problem.
so that we can get to more questions. But I think at this point, unfortunately, we will have to wrap up. So thank you so much for giving a talk with us today. It was terrific and very insightful. And thank you also to everyone tuning in online and posting your questions. We will do our best next time to get to more questions. But thank you very much.